Hello, and welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG. My name is Pamela Cone, and it's my pleasure to serve as host for this podcast series. We are so excited to have with us today Margo Fransen of Unilever, and she holds quite a few titles there: General Counsel Sustainability, Global General Counsel Oral Care, and Head of Legal for the Netherlands. Welcome, Margo.
Thank you. Hi, Pam.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk to you today, but let's start at the very beginning. Tell us about your career and how did it lead you into working in sustainability?
Happy to. I think fairness and curiosity are some key core drivers of me. And when I was growing up, I was sometimes watching TV series like Matlock and Perry Mason, and I really liked those. It was very unwavering commitment from the lawyer to get complex cases unraveled. There was an innocent person who was defended and the truth would be revealed. And I like that. And that very much resonated with those drivers that I just described. And I think it was then that I thought, hey, actually, I would like to pursue a career in law. During my studies, I definitely realized that I would probably not be so good at defending potential criminals. And I was much more interested in corporate law. And so I started as a commercial lawyer in private practice. I've done lots of things there. I've done commercial contracting, corporate litigation, M&A, and I liked that very much. What I did notice is that, especially in the transactions, I sometimes wondered, oh, what have been the main drivers for this deal? Why is this deal going forward and the other one isn't? And also, what happens after closing? And is it a successful transition or is it a good deal? And so I was actually noticing a little bit of an appetite to see a bit more of the full picture. And I think that was when I decided that actually moving in-house and being a bit more involved in the whole strategic angle of transactions like that, I was interested in that and I wanted to see that more close. And I then chose for Unilever, a very big global player, listings in London, in New York, in Amsterdam. And for a very long time and on very many fronts, Unilever has been a pioneer. And so in that sense, I think it has given me the opportunity to move across various roles, and I've done quite some exciting things. And again, on the same kind of topics that I had been doing in private practice, but then much more involved. So I've been involved in attempts to hostile takeovers, an EU cross-border merger between our two parent companies just before Brexit. And then at some point, I moved to an executive compensation and employment role, where I was the secretary of the compensation committee of the board, and I was responsible for the design and the implementation of the reward policy for our board and across the company, including incentive plans. And I think you also asked me, Pam, how did you then come to focus on sustainability? And actually, yes. I think that went quite gradually. I think for sure Unilever has been, of course, at the forefront of sustainability, and it's been part of its DNA, I think, for now nearly a century. It's driving a business for the long-term value creation whilst doing good for people and the planet. And again, that resonates with my core values of fairness. So that was definitely a big tick for choosing Unilever. And in 2010, Unilever was one of the first companies that launched its Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. placing sustainability really at the core of its strategy. And it was in that context that in my role in executive compensation, I was first really working on a sustainability topic, because we were also one of the first companies that put a sustainability progress performance measure in its incentive plans. And of course, that was a novelty. We had not seen that being done before, but when you launch something like that, it also means that you have to think very careful, okay, which indicators from sustainability topics are we going to include, and how are we going to measure them, and how are we going to reward them, and how are we going to make sure that not only our board and our investors, but also our other stakeholders really see that this is a robust performance measure. And I think that sparked definitely of my further interest in that topic. Then in 2021, Unilever launched its first climate transition action plan. And Ritva Sotama, she was then the chief legal officer, and she said, well, Margo, you've dealt with the topic in the context of executive compensation. Why don't you also be involved from a legal perspective with this climate transition action plan? And so I did. And I learned, we all learned in a very short cycle, again, pioneering, because, well, what did we know about how should you make and set up a climate transition plan? But we did it, and we got very good feedback from our investors. But it was then and there that I really thought, yeah, I really like to do more with that. And so in 2023, I was then appointed as General Counsel for Sustainability.
And what does that entail, being General Counsel for Sustainability for Unilever?
It's a very broad role.
Yes.
And also it is a first time that we have this role. So that means that we are really also building it whilst doing it, right? So I am involved in different kind of topics. The climate transition action plan I mentioned, we have relaunched that now, an update in 2024. And so that is a project where I've been involved from A to Z in terms of preparing the content, reading it, engaging with investors, and till the end, bringing it to a shareholder vote, which again was successful. I'm involved in sustainability reporting. There's anything that has to do with what we report on in our annual report on sustainability, but also what we publish on our websites, what we say in terms of our strategy about sustainability. That's where I would be involved. But it's also everything around greenwashing, a very hot topic, as you know. There's lots of regulation coming our way. There's litigation about it. And so I'm involved with training our people, training actually really across the whole company. What does that mean? What does that mean for our claims? How are we going to make sure that we comply with those regulations? It's that kind of topics. It's very broad. Sometimes it's also about plastics or about climate or about nature or livelihoods, where we have specific projects with partners or we have specific commitments. And then I would be involved as well.
So I don't know how you have time to do all of that. Presumably you have a great team working with you.
Well, it's partly embedded also in our business groups. So definitely on a topic like the green claims, then I work with a team across the business groups where we work on the guidance and the training materials together. And for the respective implementation in their own business groups, those lawyers are responsible for that themselves. But of course, I bring them together to make sure that we have a holistic approach across Unilever. What I also do is, and I think I spoke with some other general counsels who do sustainability in-house or sometimes also in lawyers in private practice. It's very difficult to not have lawyers that totally don't have anything to do with sustainability. So in M&A, of course, there's sustainability, and therefore also there you sometimes work together on deals with the legal M&A team to look at specific warranties, indemnities in that context. Or I work with our people in the supply chain where we look at specific issues that require some more really on the ground knowledge of what are, developments, etc. So it's a role where I don't necessarily have a very big team, but at the same time, the people with whom I work is quite big.
And I think that's such an important point to make, that all lawyers have to think with a sustainability mindset in the way they're advising their own in-house work, or if they're a private practice lawyer advising their clients. John Kerry famously said, "We are all climate lawyers now, whether we want to be or not, because it truly impacts everything." You mentioned something about sustainability reporting being one area that you are responsible for. I read something recently where there's a growing frustration that with all of these new reporting requirements, it's almost as if we're spending more time and energy and resources reporting than actually time, energy, and resources making substantial differences on our sustainability programs. What's your reaction to that? How do you manage the doing and the reporting?
Yeah, and I think, although I totally understand where that comment is coming from, I think in a way Unilever is a bit in a maybe better set up because it has been a part of how we do business for such a long time. So for us, it's not a new topic. For us, it's not a new topic on which we have been reporting, because in our annual report, we have TCFD, the Task Force for Financial Disclosure. We have a progress report on our climate transition plan, and we have actually quite an elaborate section on sustainability in itself in the annual report. Having said that, CSRD, of course, is a major thing, right? It's a bit different if you're talking about some more voluntary disclosure, the ones I was just referring to, rather than total new, very extensive, very detailed legislation. That in itself is a huge task. I would not be telling the truth if we would be saying as Unilever, oh, peanuts for us. It's not. I think also we have to recognize we've done decades about evolving our financial reporting framework, and now all of a sudden we all have to report under a non-financial reporting framework, whereas also we don't yet know how that's going to evolve in other jurisdictions. And of course you want to create a model that is gonna make sense, that is user-friendly, and that you can show everywhere, right? You don't want to end up with very elaborate, complex reporting that actually no one is really going to read because it's so tough to read. Let's call it like that. So I think that is definitely the challenge that we will be having. And I don't think it's an excuse to say we're so busy with reporting and therefore we can't do the actual work. But that it is a very big job, yes. But at the same time, I also hope that over time, we will get to a global standard where the regulatory frameworks evolve into that gives us a real good sense of what is a company doing? Is it worth what they are saying? Is it doing what it's saying? Is it really contributing to how it runs its business? And then something that is easily readable. I think that openness, that transparency can be of very great value, not only for companies, but to all stakeholders to see how well and how good is a company doing on that front.
I completely agree with that vision. And I would hope that at some point, those global standards or the regulatory frameworks that we're all reporting to are going to be very similar to the sort of financial statement rigor that all companies in the world have to comply with now, so that investors and stakeholders and employees, everybody has is able to have an understanding of where that company is and what they're doing and how well they're doing.
Exactly.
So financial measures, sustainability measures, maybe one day that'll be all the same reporting.
I think it will be. It will take time. And I think also I really hope also that regulators and stakeholders, and now I'm talking also about investors, that we are going to be a bit patient with companies. Yeah, this is not something that you do from one day to another, and it will evolve. And so give us also a little bit of time to get everything in the right place in the right way. And sometimes it will be difficult to report on something. That doesn't mean that you don't have your act together, but it's something where, well, for instance, about your supply chain, it can be massive, and not everyone in your whole supply chain will be able to provide that data that in the end you will need to report on. I think the limited assurance is going to help us with that. But yeah, it's something where I really hope that we're also going to have a little bit of patience with each other to really come to a place where everyone is feeling, yes, this is a right set of reporting standards.
I completely agree with that as well. And I think that patience needs to be extended to our own companies. And I'll give you an example. I work with a lot of law firms, and law firms are just getting started on this journey, right? And most of it is because of client pressure. We're part of the client supply chain. And so clients are expecting certain disclosures of their law firms. And I think this is true of most companies, but perhaps particularly of law firms. They don't want to disclose anything unless they're like at 100%. They don't want to admit that they're only just starting the journey, or that they're only at 50% on some of these metrics. But I think any company that is working on this understands that it's a journey, not an event, and not a tick box. It is definitely a journey. And of course, at Unilever, you've been lucky because you've been not lucky, but you are ahead of everybody else because you've been on the journey for a long time. But for a lot of companies that haven't measured or mapped out their journey and now are suddenly being asked to report on it, and they haven't had that history of measuring or mapping or managing that journey, it's as you said earlier, it's like creating it while you're trying to do it, or trying to create it while you're trying to report on it. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be for companies, for themselves. So I think you're absolutely right. Patience is going to be required of everybody.
Yeah.
What do you think the rest of 2024 and 2025 will have in store for us with respect to ESG or sustainability?
Well, I think you touched, of course, on a very big one, which is the non-financial reporting. I think that's a major one. I think more and more it's a consequence, I think, of the reporting, but we will see that more and more companies really understand the importance of integrating ESG in your financial strategy, right? ESG considerations are so much embedded into your financial decision making, and it's not a nice to have. You need to map it, you need to project it, and you need to build it into your financial models. And I think that's a good thing because it will, again, create transparency and credibility with your stakeholders. And in particular, if you look at investors, for instance, that's definitely a topic that they find important, but also your employees want this from you. So I think that's definitely something that we will see. We touched a little bit about the whole supply chain sustainability. I think being able to understand what's going on in your supply chain is super important. And as you know, we will have in Europe the directive, which is about the due diligence across your supply chain. And I think if you have not done that as a company, it's really important that you are going to be in a place where you have absolutely the right processes in place to track and trace and audit, and where necessary remedy any issues that you have. There's a lot of litigation on that topic as well, so I think that's definitely something where a big focus will be. Another one is the climate transition plans. Quite a lot of companies already, global companies, have that kind of plans. I think it's really a must if you are a big company and you have a big scope 3 footprint, that you really have a plan that is clear, that's measurable, and that has actionable pathways to achieve net zero emissions. And of course, there's regulation like the CSDDD that even requires you to have a climate transition plan. But I think also as a company, it's important to have that. It gives you a point on the horizon to work towards. And it also is a little bit aligned to that topic about making sure that you have embedded that in your strategy, in your financial business plan, so that what you are aiming to achieve, you can also cost for it. Any other topics? Yeah.
Well, even just the ones you've mentioned, it almost feels overwhelming. I don't know if you ever feel overwhelmed.
Yes, definitely. No, I do. And also, it's a lot. Yeah, it's absolutely a lot. And what I sometimes find difficult is the enormous speed at which legislation is coming our way. Yes. And like I've said, I don't have a very big team where everyone is holding some topic, but and especially because we are a global company, it is not, of course, not only the EU who's doing this with its Green Deal, although that is, like a huge piece of legislation, but it's really local legislation, regional legislation, and it's not always harmonized, as we just discussed in terms of the reporting. And so keeping track of that, I find sometimes quite overwhelming. And also, and this is maybe a bit, it's really a personal note that I make, is that what you sometimes see is that even if you're trying to make a real serious good effort as a company, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be free from litigation. You can see that because of governments have quite delayed, I think, addressing some of the topics that we are now facing, like climate change, etc. There is now so much pressure on companies to do the right thing, to take action, that's very often also invoked by litigation. And that I find sometimes difficult because it's not always the bad guys that are being litigated against. Right. It's sometimes also the companies that are really trying to make a very good effort. and maybe not as fast as we want, but we all have to realize this is not something that you fix with a clip of your fingers. This is real long trajectory where, yes, we need to start changing as soon as we can, but it doesn't mean that we fix the issues that are out there in a minute. And that can sometimes be a bit overwhelming. Yeah.
And it goes back to what we talked about earlier with the patience, right? There are lots of companies working really hard to try to do the right thing, and yet, some are being subject to litigation, and it's frustrating when that happens. So given all of that, and given how overwhelming all of this is, what gives you hope? This is my final question for all of my podcast guests. What gives you hope?
Yeah, that's a really good that's a really good question. I think I can find different things that give me hope. The fact that because of the issues that we have, you see that we are also becoming more creative, right? We are seeing much more innovation in climate technologies, for instance. We see much more focus on climate technology, on innovation in terms of products that we create. That is something that really gives me hope. I think there is definitely an appetite and also a very big will to change for the good. I think we will see further increased corporate commitment, right? The whole drive to further report on this, the more transparency, I'm convinced that that will mean that companies will have to take the responsibility and really step up their efforts if they are not yet doing so. So I think that's only good. I think it is really important that we as corporates do take also part of that responsibility. The other one that I really think is a trend that I start to see quite a bit, and I think is only good for the whole planet, is that there is a heightened awareness of the importance of protecting biodiversity. I think we are seeing much more companies that are incorporating natural capital into their business strategies, which is essential for preserving our beautiful planet, the ecosystems, and ensuring that we have sustainable resourcing use. And of course, I think we also see a little bit of more advancements in the circular economy. So the approach of reducing waste and to promoting the efficiency of resources, that all helps with the way we do business, how we produce sustainably. And I hope that we are also going to influence the patterns of ourselves, us as consumers. But my last one, I think, is the one that's also very important. That's the social equity and the inclusion. I really hope that by attacking these topics and being more aware of diversity and equity and inclusion, which I also see as a very big part of ESG topics, that we as corporates are really going to make our play in recognizing the importance of creating inclusive workplaces and also taking care of the people around us in our societies, so that we hopefully also will have a bit of a more fair society. That's really what I hope for.
I agree. And all of those things give me hope as well. And I also feel like what gives me hope is lawyers using their talents and skills and influence and abilities to help the transition. And I'm seeing it more and more in legal departments, in private practice lawyers, in civil service. Lawyers, I feel, have a very significant role to play. So thank you for sharing your role at Unilever and how you got there and everything you're working on and everything that gives you hope. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Margo.
Thank you, Pam. That was really interesting. And I feel a lot of happiness for having been able to share this with you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.